Everything you've been told about selfishness is a lie. You've been taught it's ugly, a flaw that exposes greed, arrogance, or a lack of compassion. So you've been conditioned to give your time, your energy, your money, because that's what makes you a good person, isn't it? Think about the person who lives by that rule. Always available, always saying yes. The friend who answers every late-night call. The employee who stays late without pay. The partner who bends until they break. Years pass, and piece by piece they give themselves away until there's nothing left. No rest, no joy, no identity beyond serving the needs of others. And then, when they finally stop giving, they face something colder than exhaustion. Silence. The people they sacrificed for drift away. Calls stop. Gratitude fades. And they see the truth. Their value was never who they were, only what they could provide. We tell ourselves that putting others first is the highest moral path. But what if that belief isn't just wrong? What if it's dangerous? What if selfishness, in its purest form, isn't about taking more, but protecting the only thing you truly own, yourself? 500 years ago, Niccolò Machiavelli lived in a world that punished kindness for its own sake. Renaissance Italy was a chessboard of betrayals, backroom deals, and silent assassinations. In Florence's courts, one naive decision could mean exile or death. Machiavelli saw that self-preservation wasn't optional. It was the foundation of power. Before we go deeper, understand this. What you're about to hear will challenge everything you've been taught about morality, power, and how the world really works. We'll break down why selfishness, when used the right way, isn't a weakness, it's a weapon. We'll uncover the strategies that history's most powerful figures used to protect themselves, build influence, and survive in worlds far more dangerous than ours, yet eerily similar. By the end, you'll know exactly how to turn this so-called flaw into your greatest strength without losing your integrity in the process. So stay with me until the end, because the moment you see the full picture, you won't be able to look at your own choices the same way again. To him, selfishness wasn't greed. It was strategy. Guard your interests. Protect your resources. Never assume others will act in your favor without something to gain. So here's the real question. If protecting yourself makes you selfish, why do the most powerful people in history, kings, presidents, corporate titans, do exactly that? And why does it keep working? Because maybe selfishness isn't the enemy of morality. Maybe it's the reason you have the power to choose morality in the first place. Florence, early 1500s. A city that glittered with art and innovation on the surface, yet underneath it pulsed with danger. Power changed hands not in peaceful elections, but in quiet corridors, through whispered deals, forged letters, and sudden betrayals. Assassinations were not crimes of passion. They were calculated moves on the chessboard of survival. It was here that Niccolò Machiavelli built his career. A diplomat, a keen observer, and at times a reluctant participant in the brutal theater of Florentine politics. For years, he served the Republic, navigating between powerful families and foreign powers, forging alliances that could crumble overnight. But when the Medici family returned to power, Machiavelli's loyalty to the Republic became his undoing. He was arrested, tortured, and exiled from the city he had served. It was in exile, stripped of his influence and position, that Machiavelli wrote his most infamous work, The Prince, a book not about how the world should be, but about how it is. It was a guide for leaders who wanted to survive in a system where morality was a luxury few could afford. Machiavelli's advice was clear. If you wished to endure, you had to protect your own position above all else. Perception mattered more than truth. Appearances of virtue could be more valuable than virtue itself. Generosity should be strategic, never reckless. Friendships were tools, alliances were weapons, and loyalty was only as strong as the advantage it provided. In Renaissance Florence, these principles weren't cynicism. They were survival. A prince who hesitated out of moral purity could lose his city. A diplomat who trusted too easily could lose his life. 5 centuries later, the players have changed, but the game feels eerily familiar. In modern politics, the image a leader projects often outweighs the reality of their policies. In corporate boardrooms, perception management can make or break careers. Even in influencer culture, carefully curated authenticity has become its own form of strategy. From a Florentine palace to a global stage, the same truth echoes. In competitive arenas, self-interest isn't a flaw, it's the foundation on which power is built. And Machiavelli understood that those who failed to recognize this would be consumed by those who did. From the moment you take your first breath, your biology is working to keep you alive. Before ambition, before dreams, before morality, there is survival. It's not a choice, it's an instinct. Every living thing on this planet is wired to protect itself first. A tree leans toward the sun, pulling nutrients for its own growth before offering fruit. A bird will abandon its nest if staying means certain death. Humans are no different. We are built on the same primal foundation. Yet somewhere along the way, society reframed self-preservation as selfishness and made selfishness a sin. You were told to give more, share more, sacrifice more. You were told that the measure of a good person is how much of yourself you're willing to hand over. On the surface, it sounds noble, but biology doesn't negotiate with cultural expectations. You cannot outrun the fact that your mental, emotional, and physical energy are finite. Neglect yourself long enough, and the system starts to break. Burnout isn't just exhaustion, it's your body and mind waving a white flag. Resentment is the emotional scar tissue that forms when you give without return. And perhaps worst of all, you begin to lose agency over your own life. When you give too much for too long, you stop existing for yourself and start existing as a resource for others. You become the dependable coworker who stays late because no one else will. The friend who's always on call but rarely called upon for joy. The partner who pours love into someone who doesn't know how to return it. Modern life amplifies this trap. Workplaces praise team players while quietly rewarding those who protect their boundaries. Social media glorifies selflessness but rarely shows the private cost. Our culture conditions you to be endlessly available. Reachable by email at midnight, expected to say yes to every favor, pressured to respond to every message instantly. Here's the truth. Every act of genuine generosity comes from surplus. You cannot give meaningfully if you are empty. You cannot protect others if you are constantly under siege yourself. Selfishness in its truest form is not greed. It is the act of securing your own oxygen mask before helping the person next to you. It is not a betrayal of your humanity. It's the very thing that allows you to sustain it. This is the foundation Machiavelli understood centuries ago. If you don't guard your own interests, someone else will claim them as theirs. Powerful people understand something most never learn. Self-interest is not something you hide. It's something you design. The trick is making it look like the natural byproduct of competence, charm, and leadership, rather than calculated strategy. They do this through a system, a set of repeatable principles that allow them to pursue their own advantage without appearing ruthless. The first principle is controlled access. In psychology, scarcity increases value. The less people can have of you, the more they want you. Julius Caesar didn't linger in the marketplace for idle chatter. His appearances were deliberate, framed as events. Queen Elizabeth I, though adored by her subjects, made herself rare enough that her presence carried almost mythical weight. In modern times, high-profile CEOs like Tim Cook or Satya Nadella rarely give unplanned interviews. Even celebrities understand this. Think of how Beyoncé can disappear for years, then re-emerge with a single project that dominates global attention. When you control access, you control the narrative around your worth. The second principle is selective generosity. This is where many get it wrong. Generosity, when indiscriminate, depletes both your resources and your leverage. The powerful give in ways that strengthen their position, not weaken it. Rockefeller famously donated vast sums to public works, but always in a manner that reinforced his image as a benevolent titan rather than an exploiter of industry. Elizabeth I rewarded loyalty with titles and lands, binding nobles to her through calculated acts of kindness. Today, this looks like the business leader who mentors promising talent, not purely out of altruism, but to cultivate allies who will later serve their vision. The third principle is in narrative framing. People rarely see your actions without interpreting them through a story, and powerful people ensure that story is theirs to tell. Actions are rarely left to speak for themselves. They are embedded in a broader tale that explains, justifies, and elevates them. Caesar's military campaigns were not framed as raw conquest, but as the expansion of Rome's glory. In the corporate sphere, a controversial merger might be positioned as a bold step toward innovation, rather than consolidation of power. Celebrities use this constantly, crafting philanthropic gestures as personal passion projects, even when they align perfectly with branding needs. Each of these methods works because it balances two forces: the reality of self-interest and the illusion of public service. They ensure that while the individual advances their own position, they do so in a way that others perceive as beneficial, admirable, even noble. This is the essence of Machiavellian selfishness, not the blunt force of greed, but the quiet art of making self-preservation look like leadership. The ability to protect your time, your energy, and your goals is what keeps you from being consumed by the demands of everyone else. But there's a line, subtle, often invisible, where healthy self-interest turns into something darker. Healthy selfishness begins with boundaries. It is the quiet refusal to trade your well-being for someone else's comfort. It's saying no when the request drains you more than it serves you. It's protecting your resources so that when you do give, you can give with intention rather than resentment. This kind of selfishness is an anchor. It keeps you steady in storms, able to act from clarity instead of depletion. Leaders who practice it don't apologize for putting their mission first, but they also understand the necessity of mutual benefit. Destructive selfishness, on the other hand, is short-term greed disguised as ambition. It is the hunger to win even when victory means burning bridges, hollowing trust, and leaving wreckage behind. It may look successful at first, fast gains, visible dominance, but its foundation is unstable. Corruption erodes the very networks and alliances that power depends on. Consider the contrast. On one side, a leader like Marcus Aurelius, whose reign balanced Roman stability with personal restraint, refusing to use his position solely for indulgence. His self-interest was tied to the empire's endurance. On the other side, a figure like Enron's leadership, whose relentless pursuit of profit dismantled not only their own company, but the lives of thousands. One left a legacy of respect, the other a cautionary tale. This is the moral tension Machiavelli understood, but didn't sugarcoat. To endure in power, you must act for yourself, but you must also calculate the long-term consequences. A strategy that enriches you today, but isolates you tomorrow is not strategy at all. The most effective form of selfishness is sustainable. It strengthens you without making enemies you can't afford to have. In the end, the question isn't whether you should be selfish. It's whether your selfishness builds or destroys. If it builds, it becomes the engine of longevity. If it destroys, it becomes your countdown clock. Machiavelli once wrote, "Men are quick to forget favors, but never forget injuries." It is a sentence soaked in centuries of human behavior, a warning that the generosity you offer will fade from memory faster than you think. The harsh truth is that when you give endlessly without protecting your own interests, you don't earn loyalty, you create dependency. And the moment you can no longer provide what others want, you become expendable. History is filled with these quiet tragedies. Consider the reformer who poured decades into building a movement, only to be cast aside when new leaders found their idealism inconvenient. They had fought for the cause at every personal cost, trusting that their sacrifice would be remembered. Yet the moment their presence was no longer politically useful, they were erased from speeches, removed from photographs, and replaced without ceremony. It's not just a story of politics. In the modern world, this same pattern plays out in offices, in families, and friendships. The employee who worked weekends for years, believing loyalty would secure their position, is let go during restructuring without a second thought. The friend who always listened, always showed up, suddenly realizes the relationship was sustained entirely on their effort. And when they need help in return, no one answers. This is the silent danger of living entirely for others. You make yourself a tool in their plans rather than a force in your own. You trade your autonomy for a fleeting sense of belonging, and over time, you forget what you even wanted for yourself because your energy has been spent fueling everyone else's ambitions. Burnout culture feeds on this. Corporations glorify going above and beyond, while society romanticizes self-sacrifice as the highest virtue. Yet the ones who ascend, the ones who endure, are rarely those who give without limit. They are the ones who balance contribution with protection, who understand that service without self-interest is a slow erosion of identity. Machiavelli's insight is not an endorsement of cruelty, it is a reminder of human nature. People remember injuries because pain leaves a scar. Favors fade because comfort is easy to take for granted. If you ignore your own needs, you create a future where you will be forgotten. Not because you were unworthy, but because you were too generous to draw the line. In the end, the lesson is simple and uncomfortable. If you don't guard your own interests, no one else will. You cannot protect what you have not defined. Before you can even begin to stand guard over your life, you must first know, deeply and without hesitation, what your core interests are. Not the things you think you should care about, but the few essentials that form the spine of your existence. It could be your time, your health, your creative freedom, your reputation, your family's security. These are the assets you guard at all costs. If you don't know them, the world will decide for you, and its decisions will rarely be in your favor. Once you have that clarity, you draw the lines, the non-negotiable boundaries. Saying no is not cruelty, it is self-respect in action. Every time you agree to something that violates your boundaries, you dilute your authority. You teach people that your time and energy are up for negotiation. Boundaries must be enforced without guilt, because they are not walls to shut the world out. They are gates that you control. Then comes the part few want to hear. You must invest in yourself relentlessly. Self-mastery is not optional if you want to maintain power over your own life. This means sharpening your skills until they are undeniable. It means protecting your physical health so your body can carry your ambitions. It means expanding your knowledge so you can anticipate moves before they happen. A powerful person is not only hard to manipulate, they are hard to replace. Finally, generosity, but with precision. Give in ways that strengthen your position, that build loyalty, and that deepen alliances. Random acts of self-sacrifice may make you feel noble in the moment, but strategic generosity makes you valuable over the long term. The leader who mentors promising talent, the professional who shares resources at the right time, the friend who offers help when it will be remembered. All of them give, but they give in ways that expand their influence rather than erode it. These 4 steps, clarity, boundaries, self-mastery, and strategic generosity, are not about becoming cold or selfish in the hollow sense. They are about ensuring that when you give, it comes from a place of strength, not depletion. In a world that will happily consume everything you offer, these steps are how you remain the author of your own life, rather than a footnote in someone else's. In the end, the story we began with, the one of the person who gave everything until there was nothing left, was never about greed versus generosity. It was about balance, about survival. Real selfishness, the kind Machiavelli would have recognized, isn't a license to take more than you need. It's the discipline to ensure you always have enough to stand on your own, to endure storms without collapsing, and to walk into the future without depending entirely on the goodwill of others. The world will not stop asking, people will not stop taking, and life will not pause so you can recover from what you've lost. Which means the choice is always the same. Either you protect your own interests or you hand them over for someone else to use for their own. Selfishness, in its truest form, is not the enemy of kindness, it's the foundation of it. When you stand firmly on your own ground, you can choose when to give, how to give, and to whom. That choice is what makes generosity meaningful instead of hollow. Without it, you're not helping, you're being harvested. So ask yourself, where in your life have you been selfless to the point of self-harm? Where have you given away time, energy, or trust without thought for what it cost you? And more importantly, how will you reclaim it? Protecting yourself is not a betrayal of others. It's a promise to your future self, a promise that you will not be left empty. If this message resonated with you, leave a comment below. Share the one area you're ready to reclaim. Pass this video to someone who gives too much without realizing the cost. And if you want more explorations into the psychology of power, human behavior, and the truths most people avoid, make sure you subscribe. Because this isn't just about being selfish. It's about never giving away the parts of yourself you can't afford to lose.